if you weren't here last week, this is a continuation of a sermon that we started last week. It's in our series, Relationships God's Way. It's a sermon on parenting, and so I recognize that there are a couple of different groups in here. There are people that are actively parents right now. You have kids. Maybe there are people that you have kids, but they're grown and they're kind of adults and they're making their own decision. And then there's a group of people in here that aren't quite parents yet, but you're married and you're looking forward to becoming parents one day. And then there's everybody that's under the age of 18. And so I know all of you think, this is only for people that actively have kids that are living in their house right now. But listen, the Harpers and the Kaysons and Key and Lauren and all of you kids that are under 18, this message is just as much for you as it is for your mom and dad, okay? So it'll be really important for you. If you're following along in your Bible, we're going to be in Ephesians 6, but we're also going to be in Proverbs as well, Proverbs 22:6. Let's just read that really quickly. It says, to train up a child in the way that he should go, so even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And we're going to be looking at that, but we're also going to be looking at that in conjunction with Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4, that says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And I'm not going to rehash the points from last week. You can look at those, just clearly identify the destination and map the route. But I want to just jump right in and start with what I think is point 3 on your sermon guide. But it's the first blank, and it's this, that as a parent, one of our jobs is to define the guardrails. Now, everybody knows what a guardrail is, right? It's the thing that's on the side of the highway when there's a cliff. So if you drift or something happens, it keeps you from falling off the cliff. Think about a more modern day version of the guardrail is the rumble strips. You guys know what that is on the highway? I know some people, mainly my daughter Savannah. Her main goal is to just keep it between the rumble strips, right? Just on the right and then back up on the left, and then if it's not rumbling, then she knows she's good. I'm going to be in so much trouble this afternoon. I'm just kidding. She's not that bad. But it's our job to define the guardrails. Now, I'm just going to give you some non-biblical resources that you can use at your disposal, just a couple of books that will help you as you raise your kids. And it doesn't matter how old your kids are, each one of these will help you. So maybe you're a dad and your oldest is like 30 or 40. That's okay, because you probably have grandkids. And if you don't have grandkids, just look around. Our church is full of the next generation, and we need your help in raising our kids. So I'm just going to give you just a couple of recommendations of books. You can just write these things down. Some of the titles are some of the authors. I'm not 100% sure because they didn't translate in my notes, but I can look those up and give them to you. But the first one is this: 50 Things Every Child Needs to Know Before Leaving Home. 50 Things Every Child Needs to Know Before Leaving Home. And then the next two are written by different authors. The first one is by Robert Lewis. It's Raising a Modern Day Knight. And the other one is by Pam Farrell. It's called Raising a Modern Day Princess. So obviously, if you have a boy, raising a modern day knight. If you have a daughter, raising a modern day princess. But listen, I would also encourage you to, if you anybody here only have daughters? Butler, you only have daughters, right? You should get the Raising the Modern Day Knight book and read it. Because your girls need to know how a boy needs to treat them. Your girls need to know that if they go on a date and the boy doesn't open the door, ain't happening, right? And so that I would encourage you to do that. But define the guardrails. So let's look at Proverbs 22:6. Let's just dive in really quick. Train up a child in the way that they should go. When they're old, they will not depart from it. That Hebrew word train, the Hebrew word for train means to make narrow, or it means to strangle. Now listen, we're not talking like Bart Simpson strangle, but I know that sometimes we all want to do that to our kids, right? Like, what are you doing? But it means to make narrow. It means to put guardrails. It means restricting the path that your kids are walking on. Would any of us here let any of our children sleep with a live hand grenade? Anybody? No, we wouldn't, right? It would be silly of me to give Harper or any of my kids a live hand grenade to put under their pillow to sleep with. That's a pretty smart guardrail, right? That I put in my family. You know, you're not going to sleep with live ammunition in your room. But how many of us let them sleep with this in their room. Now, this in and of itself won't physically kill them, but it will kill them mentally. We give them unfettered access to Lord knows what through their cell phone devices or through their tablets or through their computers. So like one of the guardrails in my family is we don't have any digital devices in rooms. The only devices that go in room are Becky and I, and we have little stands that our phones set on, and they charge at night. And the only reason that our phones are in our room is because of my position and that I have to be available 24/7. And so if something happens to one of you and you call, that phone needs to be by my bedside so I can hear it. But my kids aren't allowed to have devices in their room. It's a guardrail that we've set up. And they try and find ways around it every once in a while, you know. And usually it's always good. It's always, Dad, it's really loud or noisy in here. Can I take my computer, can I take my Chromebook to the room and work on homework at my desk? And my answer is no every time. Because we don't ever want to put our toe over the line, right? Because once you put your toe over the line, it's so hard to bring it back. We define guardrails. We understand that kids need boundaries. Your child doesn't need you to be their best friend. They need you to be their parents. You can still be a good friend, but you are a parent first. So defining some guardrails looks like some things. You set some boundaries and rules that they have to obey. It's non-negotiable, some rules that you set in your house. Some things are negotiable, right? We don't live in or at least in our family, it's not a dictatorship where it's what I say goes no matter what. But there are some things that Becky and I have set that are non-negotiable rules. And trying to push those boundaries or talk your way out of that rule to do something that's outside of that rule will only get you in more trouble in our house. Well, so one of the things that we do is man, I don't know about you, but I love to sleep. Anybody else that just love to sleep? Kids spend their entire childhood fighting naps, and parents, we spend our entire adulthood just trying to find a place to get like a 15-minute nap. So one of the things that we've done in our journey this last year is we've identified that sleep is really important for us. And so believe it or not, like Becky and I, we're shutting it down. We're in our room. We're getting ready for bed 9:30. We're lights out 10 o'clock. Like I'm asleep at 10:01. And one of the things that we've said to our kids is, hey, you need an early bedtime. And so typically what happens is on the weekends, right, that bedtime gets extended just a little bit. But what we've discovered over the course of the last couple of weeks is that extension has gone on a little bit later and a little bit later at the discovery of some shows that they really like to watch on Paramount Plus or whatever it is. And so I'm like, I'm out. Like, I'm going to bed. Like, you guys do whatever. And 10:30 becomes 11, 11 becomes 11:15, 11:15 becomes 12, 12 becomes 12:30. And then you know what Daddy can't abide more than anything? Is when you stay up till 12:30 watching a show and you get up the next morning and you're grumpy with Mom. That don't happen in my house. And so we've had to define some guardrails for our kids on when it comes to bedtime. You don't stay up super late. We teach the word. We learn the most powerful and blessing word that you can give to your kids. If you want to give your kids a blessing growing up, the most powerful thing that you can say to them is a simple 2-letter word, and it's no. If you want to bless your children, learn to say the word no. If you want to be a blessing to your kids, if you want to define guardrails, learn to say to them, that's wrong, you shouldn't do that. It's okay to tell your kids that they've messed up. Don't do everything for your children. If their room is filthy, make them clean it up. If they have laundry, make them do their laundry. You are not your child's servants. You are their parent. Define a guardrail for them. Determine what, when, and how they consume their media. Don't automatically come to your kid's defense. Every parent, look at that sweet little innocent child that's sitting next to you. They are messed up. They are. We got teachers in this room. And we've got teachers in this room. And I know what happens. Mom and Dad will come running into a classroom and defend kids. We all know it, man. They are not perfect. I don't care. what you think. They are not perfect. They are messed up. You know why? Because they take after you and you're messed up. Establish a curfew. Reject passivity. Dads, I said no is one of the most powerful things that you can say to your kids. You know another powerful thing that you can say to your kids? I'm sorry I was wrong. I'm sorry I was wrong. It's one of the most powerful things that you can say to your kids. Own that you messed up. Own that you overreacted. Own that you raised your voice and you yelled. Own that you made a bad decision. Own that you brought down the hammer or ruled a judgment before having all of the information. We love them in a way, man. One of the most powerful ways that you can keep your kids from getting angry at you is to admit when you're wrong. When you've dropped the ball, when you've messed up, just say, I was wrong, I apologize. And listen to what your kids say. You know, I love to joke, I love to have fun, I love to mess around. And I've got 3 daughters, 3 amazing, beautiful, they're going to take the world by storm daughters. And I love them to death, and they are intelligent and funny and beautiful and all the wonderful things. And they've got an older brother who towers over them. Cooper's taller than me. I don't know how tall he is, but he's going to be like 19 feet tall when he's done growing. But his feet are smaller than mine, so I don't know, go figure. But one of the things that I used to do, and I'm not proud of, but my littlest daughter, Harper Emma, she's the one that did the bulletin thing. She has a heart of gold. She loves Jesus and she loves people. But she's tiny and she's not very strong. And so she would come to me in the kitchen and say, hey, Dad, can you open this jar of pickles for me? And for the longest time, my response, just teasingly to Harper, was, oh, hi, my name is Harper. I can do anything a boy can do except for open a jar of pickles. And I would open the jar of pickles, and I would laugh, and she would look at me, and she would smirk, and she would walk off. And I would do it again. And I would do it again, and I would do it again, and I would do it again. And one day, about 6 months ago, she came up to me. After she had gone to Savannah, after she had gone to Josie, after she had gone to Cooper, after she had gone to her mom, she went to everybody else in the house to ask for help because she didn't want to hear her dad say, oh, hi, my name is Harper. I can do anything a boy can do except for open ... And she walked up to me with a resigned look on her face, holding this jar of, I don't even remember what it was. Harper probably does. And she said, Dad, I need your help. And I started in on my little bit, thinking I was being funny, Dad. And she looked at me and goes, Dad, that hurts my feelings. And I sat down with her, and I put the jar of pickles down, and I started crying. And I said, Harper, Emma, I promise you, I will never, ever, ever, ever say that to you again. And I owned it. And I think I can stand here today, and Harper, you can not right now if it's not true, but I don't think that I've ever said it. Have I said it? No. And I'll never say it to her again. Except for maybe on the day that I walk her down the aisle. And it'll be a little moment between her and I and nobody else, except for the 180 of you sitting in here today. Dads, stop what you're doing and look at me. Own when you mess up with your kids. There's nothing more powerful when you drop the ball and you look at your son or daughter and you say, I'm sorry, I messed up. Listen, and your kids may be grown and you'll be like, it's too late for me. It's not too late for you. Call and talk to your son or daughter and go, hey, do you remember? And I guarantee you they remember. Because if you're an adult and it happened with you, every single one of you sitting in this room know exactly that moment in your life when your mom or dad dropped the ball and they messed up. And a piece of the relationship was broken. And you're still waiting for it to be healed. Inside of us, there's all a longing to be in relationship with our mom and our dad. Call them today. It doesn't matter how old they are. Own it with them today, and I promise you, they're going to start crying. You're going to start crying. It's going to be this amazing moment, and relationship is going to be healed. I'm not going to say it's going to be perfect, but a piece of that relationship is going to be healed, and it's going to allow you to move forward. And so as parents, moms, dads, we define the guardrails. Fourthly, the next thing on our note in our parenting handbook is this: we recognize the uniqueness of each child. Anybody here got 3 or 4 Rugrats that are exactly the same? No, they're all different, right? If you guys are anything like us, when Becky and I, we weren't ready to have kids when we had Cooper, and we brought him home, and he was sleeping through the night at like, I'm going to say some ridiculous, like 6 weeks or 7 weeks or something. Becky will correct me later if I'm wrong, but it was crazy how early he was sleeping through the night. He was a wonderful child. He was perfect. He was beautiful. He didn't walk till he was like almost 1.5, but that's because he was a bigger kid, and so it was a little bit harder for him to get moving. He loved to sleep. He loved his binkies. I mean, he was just this beautiful child. People would stop us in the grocery store and be like, your child is just beautiful. Like, oh my goodness, it's amazing how handsome he is. It's unbelievable. And we're like, man, dude, we got this down. We had Savannah, and then everything was blown out of the water. Because as a child where Cooper was perfect and slept through the night, Savannah screamed for 2 years. I'm not kidding. So when we had Savannah, we moved back to Idaho, and I was working. I took the first job I could find, and I was happy to take it because it helped pay bills. But I was stocking videos at Old Hollywood Video. Anybody remember Old Hollywood Videos? I was the night manager, and I stocked movies. That's what I did. And Becky waited tables at Applebee's, and so we had this gal that worked for me. She would watch our kids for like an hour and a half, and then I would come home after the store closed, and then I would take over. And then Becky would close the restaurant every night, and I would get home and get Cooper to bed, and Savannah would start screaming. And I would hold her, and I would walk with her, and she would scream for 2.5 hours. And Becky would pull into the driveway and open the garage door, and Savannah would go, "Mama home," and she would quit screaming. And Becky would walk in, and I was frazzled, and she would she would take Savannah from my arms, and she would look at her mom and go, "I love Mama. I'm ready for night-night," and she would lay down and go to sleep. I'm still suffering from that. That's all I'm saying. We recognize the uniqueness of each and every one of our children. Don't put the expectations of your firstborn on your second, third, or fourthborn. Each child is different. Each child learns differently. Each child understands differently. And you need to figure out how they communicate and how they understand. You know who I don't do a lot of the discipline with? Savannah. Do you know why I don't discipline her a lot? She is the 14-year-old female version of me. She's smart, she's funny. She's all those things. But we are so similar when we try and communicate. It's like oil and water. You would think, hey, we're exactly the same. It's easy. We would figure out how to communicate, and we would be able to talk, and it'd be the great kumbaya moment, roasting marshmallows around the fire. That's not how it is. It's like fireworks and machine gun fire. And so we've learned that when it comes to Savannah, there are times where Becky and I tag team parent that, and I go, I'm out, and we tag, and she goes in, and she handles the situation, and I step away. Because inevitably, when Savannah and I communicate, we clash. I understand that she's different than my other children. Now, that child for Becky is Josie. They will try, and Becky will just like, I don't know, I can't figure it out. Jason, you got to take over. And then I'll step in and I'll take over. As parents, you have to recognize the uniqueness of each child. Maybe you have like this amazing kid that is incredible at piano, and they just take to it like a duck with water, and they're your firstborn, and it's amazing. And then you put the secondborn in, and they couldn't hold a tune in a bucket. You get the point what I'm saying, right? There may be a kid in here that's taking piano lessons that doesn't really want to, but mom and dad are making them. I'm not going to make that point any further, but you understand what I'm saying. We recognize the uniqueness of each child. It's just the same thing as adults, right? The Spirit has gifted us each with different abilities. I bet if I said, hey, Lena, you want to step up here and finish reading my notes, she'd be like, no, I'm out. And I bet I would not want to go into her fourth grade classroom. That terrifies me. But she's been gifted to communicate to fourth graders. Heather's been gifted with the ability to sing and lead worship. We all have different giftings, and so it's not just a plug and play where I just grab somebody and say, here, you're going to do this because so-and-so does it, so you should be able to do it too because you're similar and you're kind of the same. We've each been gifted differently, just like our kids have been gifted differently, and so we have to understand how they are different. If you maybe just want like a verse, like just maybe like a theme verse of parenting and how to raise your kids, you might out to the side write 1 Corinthians 11:1. That verse says this. It's Paul talking, and he says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. I think if you took those few words and applied it to your parenting, that maybe it might get a little bit easier. That if you just tell your kids, man, hey, imitate me as I imitate Christ, and be like, well, what does that mean? Hey, listen, you get up in the morning and you go spend 4 or 5 minutes with Jesus in the morning. Guess what's going to happen? Your kids are going to start following that pattern. I kid you not, it will happen. You start listening to KTSY or maybe just your favorite Christian artist. You're going to start to hear that artist from their rooms more and more and more. My kids, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I used to play country music a lot. And Savannah especially hated country music. She's like, this is horrible. Like, who would listen to this? Like, oh, this is horrible. This is so, like, depressing. They lose their dog and their cat and their house and everything goes away. On a side note, just a quick joke for you. You know what you get when you play country music backwards? You get your dog back, your house back, your cat, you get it all back. Guess who Savannah's favorite artist is? Anybody guesses? Taylor Swift. She loves country music now. Imitate me as I imitate Christ. Your kids yell and scream at one another? Maybe. Now, there's going to be some naturalness in that because they're siblings and they're growing up. But maybe if it's aggressive and there's a lot of it, maybe you should take a look at yourself. You're a dad and your son struggles with specific things. I'm going to guess that at somewhere you struggle with those same things. The things that Cooper struggles with are the things that Dad struggles with. The things that Mom struggles with are typically the things that Josie and Savannah and Harper struggle with. Now, it can cross genders, right? Savannah still struggles with some things that I struggle with, just like Harper struggles with some things that I struggle with. But you have to look and understand. But let's keep going. There's one last thing. Number 5 is this: know which seat to sit in. There's some questions there that you can look at, and I'm not going to go over every single one of those. But the last point is know which seat to sit in. And this is a really, really, really important one. This is one that if you can understand and you can grasp and you can figure out how to apply, your life is going to be much easier. Now listen, I'm going to tell you what they are, and so you can just write these down and you can just figure out. Listen, if you have children that are from 0 to 13, you're the coach. You're directing, you're controlling, you're calling the plays, you're setting the boundaries, all of the boundaries and the guidelines, and they play within those boundaries and guidelines. It's like Harper with her soccer coach. He says, it's this, this, and this, and if I see you doing this, I'm going to take you off of the field and I'm going to set you on the bench. And so her last game of the season, undefeated, by the way, whoop, whoop, let's go Crazy Kickers. The coach set some guidelines, and he said to his girls, because they're actually really good, and they've got 2 or 3 really, really good players, and they've been winning games like 6-7 to nothing, 8-2. I think their first game of the season was like 15-4. And inevitably what happens is the action will start to go across the field, and then all of the girls on the other side just stop, and they just start watching. And the coach has seen this, and he's identified it, and he said to the girls, if you start walking and you're not a part of the play and you're not giving your teammates a place to pass the ball to, I'm going to take you off of the field and I'm going to set you on the bench and I'm going to put somebody in that wants to do that wants to run and be a part of the team. And so, unfortunately, we couldn't be there at their game on Saturday because we had a different commitment. The story was relayed to me, Harper walking in front of the bench, and the coach looks at her and says, are you hurt? And she said, no. And then she struggles with asthma. He goes, are you struggling to breathe? And she said, no. And he said, are you tired? And she said, no. And he said, then why aren't you running? And Harper started running. 0 to 13, you're a coach. You're directing, you're guiding, you're calling the plays. 13 to 18, you're their cheerleader and counselor as well as their coach. It means that you're encouraging and you're helping to problem solve. They're getting a little bit more freedom. Now, these aren't hard and fast guidelines. Listen, if you just turned 13, that doesn't mean that you get to do whatever you want. Mom and dad, these years are, they slide back and forth. I know that there are some people in this room that have 18-year-olds who are like, they ain't getting nothing yet, I'm still the coach. But we're encouraging, we're helping them problem solve. We're holding them accountable to the guidelines and rules that have been set up. One of our kids is missing some assignments in class. I'm not going to tell you which one because I don't want to call them out. But typically, when our kids are younger in junior high, we check almost every 2 or 3 days, like what are their assignments and their grades. And as they get older, we don't check as often. And then what happened is we got an email like, hey, you've got a negative balance on your meal, because one of our kids they got a meal and we forgot to put money on, and so that just sends the email, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. And so Becky's like looking last night, and she pulls it up, and this child is missing some assignments. And we're like, all right, what's going on? We went into problem-solving mode, like, what happened? What's going on? Like, how did you miss these? And then, right then, we reverted back into coach and said, because you're missing these things, you're not going to have some freedoms that you've had in the past. And so we went from cheerleader all the time to back to coach, and so you can see how you move back and forth. So that's 13 to 18, and as the worship team comes up and gets ready to lead us in our last song, if your children are 18 and above, you're their consultant. You're there to listen to them. You're there to pray for them. You're there to be an ear for them. You're not there to be their white knight to run in and to solve all their problems. You're there as a safety net for them. So when something happens, and maybe they make a decision that you've counseled them against, they're 18, they get to make that, and you said, please don't do this. Listen, I've gone down that road. It's the wrong choice. And they make that choice anyways. You're there as a safety net for them to fall into. You're a consultant. You're listening. And listen, it all comes back to understanding that each one of our children are unique. They're gifted differently, but what's most important is they carry within them the image of God. He created each one of your children to be in relationship with Him. And the highest, most important thing that you can do is not raise a child that gets a college degree, although that's good. It's to raise a child that loves and follows Jesus. That is the highest honor and goal that you can have as a parent. Would you stand as the team leads us in this last song?